Hi and welcome to this tutorial on how to paint trees. In this video we will go over the most basic technique for doing this. I'll be using tempera paint, but the technique is similar for watercolor as well. Basically we'll be painting from the lightest to the darkest tone. Feel free to watch, pause the video, and have a try yourself. In its most simplistic form, we want to create trees or bushes using three values. If you look at this photo, you can see some of the ends of the foliage appears to be yellow. There are also pockets of darkness, which will be the darkest tone. So in our painting, we want to have a highlight, a medium tone, and a darker tone. So you see in my palette, I have yellow for highlights, 2 greens, and 2 different blues to create a darker tree tone. Blue is better to use than using black. I'm also going to try utilizing some different brushes here as an experiment, but I tend to always just use a flathead out of preference. I'll start off with this smaller brush first. I'm not going to paint very large trees. I'm going to work kind of small just to illustrate the technique. Because it is a water-based paint, we usually start off with the lighter colors. We do this because these lighter colors usually do not cover the darker colors well. If we were painting with acrylic or oil, we would do the opposite. So I start off with some yellow paint, and I'm just going to scumble it onto the paper as illustrated in a previous video, which is linked at the top. I'm not pushing down hard, my hand is moving a little erratic. This means I'm not pushing down rhythmically. If I do this, the tree would probably look a little too mechanical. Note also the amount of paint on the brush, it's not a lot. I pull paint out from the side from my palette and don't dip into the center. I'll also paint a bush-like plant with some grass and other neighboring bushes as well. Remember, don't push or dab too hard like this. We want to skim on the surface of the paper. We would do this same technique if we were also painting a tree, which I'll show off to the side here. Sometimes having the white paper gaps showing through can also be a nice touch, especially if you had a blue sky already painted underneath. If you put your brush perpendicular to the paper, you can make small upward sweeps with it. This technique is useful for creating grass, and I know my hand is kind of covering this in the video. Apologies for that. I'll also try it out with the larger brush too, just to see if it works just as well. It's important to not have a lot of paint on your brush. I can't stress this enough. This technique is almost like using a dry brush. I'm just going to paint the whole grass area yellow, as I will apply this technique again later with the green paint. I'm now going to take some of the yellow-green to apply. I'm going to use the same technique as previous to create another tone on top. I'm thinking of this green as the main color of the foliage or bush, but I want some of the yellow color to show through. I don't want to cover all of it. Again, you need to be aware of how much paint is on your brush. If you put too much, it will blob. It's easier to apply a little and add than to apply too much and try to take away. I'll also add some grass. When doing grass, we start from the back and move forward. These strokes at the back can be shorter. As we move forward, we can make them a little longer. This will also help create the illusion of depth in our work. I'm not going to do the whole area for the sake of time though. We might not need this much detail at the back, so I'll just smoothen it out as an experiment. As the artist, these are the things you will need to make yourself aware of and to make decisions on. So we have our base color down, but you see the issue we have is that the bush is kind of blending into our grass because it's the same color. We need to create additional tones to give the plants more form. I'm going to mix this green with some of the darker green. I'll just apply it off to the side here so you can see the tone more easily. So I'm going to apply this as well as to the bush, but use it more sparingly. I use it more sparingly because I want the lighter green and the yellow to show through as well. A common mistake is that beginners will apply these new tones over the previous one, and what happens is that it appears flat again because all we then see is the new dark tone. I'm thinking the light is coming off from the right, so I'm going to apply this darker green to the left areas first. Again, I do not have a lot of paint on my brush, and I am moving my hand erratically. I don't want it to look too mechanical. With this darker green, you can already see that the bush looks more 3D. It's just like when drawing with a pencil and you shade areas with darker tones and add highlights. I'll try creating some grass too. There's very little paint on my brush and I'm pressing down very, very lightly. Now I'm going to use the darker green and apply the same techniques as previous. I will apply it to fewer places than before. Remember, we want some gaps to show through to create a more 3D form. I'll also add a bit to the grass area. I'm going to try and create another tone by adding some of this lighter blue. I'm not sure if this blue will make much of a difference, but let's try a test over to the side. And you see it looks almost the same, so let's go into the darker blue instead. Notice this dark green now. It looks great. If we only added black, it would be a bit muddy or cloudy. It's good to consider adding the neighboring color on the color wheel when you wish to create a darker tone, instead of always running towards the black. We will apply this darker tone even more sparingly than the previous layers. Just in case, I'm going to switch brushes. This temper paint I'm using is not very good. Some colors appear almost slimy. We could blow dry this before applying this darker tone. I'm also just dipping right into that dark blue to apply it in certain areas. Let's do a quick recap of this technique on this tree we had from earlier. I'm going to use the yellow-green first, thinking that the light is coming from the left. I then go into the darker green, starting from the darker side, and then add some of the darker blue. Of course, there are other ways to create trees too. I can simplify it by just doing this, and then applying a darker tone on one side. Let me try it one more time. These flat brushes can also come in handy for creating long, thin lines. Imagine I have a lake, and on the far side, I plan on creating a tree line. I rotate the brush to use the thin side to paint my horizon line. Using the same technique as previously done with the grass, I can also create the illusion of a group of trees. Apologies again, I know the camera angle is not ideal here, but hopefully you can see the gist of it. Just flick the brush up and add some darker tones. Imagine how your tree could also look with autumn colors instead. I hope you found this helpful. Good luck in creating yours. This has been a video production.